The morning of January 12, 1944. A captured American bazooka sits on a firing range outside Munich, its crude steel tube blackened with transport grime. Around it stand 3 German engineers, their breath visible in the cold Bavarian air. One of them, Hauptmann Klaus Werner, an ordnance specialist who had spent the last decade perfecting armor for the Reich's Panzers, holds a clipboard. His orders are simple: test this American toy, document its limitations, prove why German steel is superior. He lifts the weapon, surprised by its lightness. 15 pounds. A simple tube with a battery-powered trigger. No refined engineering, no precision machining, just pipe and wire, like something cobbled together in an American garage. Werner allows himself a slight smile. This is what they send against our Panthers? But what Werner doesn't know yet, what none of them know, is that in his hands he holds the blueprint for a devastating truth. Within days, this crude American stovepipe will shatter everything the German tank corps believes about invincibility. It will expose a fatal flaw hidden inside 52 rounds of ammunition stored in the side sponsons of every Panther tank rolling off production lines. And it will force an entire generation of tankers to confront a simple, terrifying reality. Their most advanced machine has been burning from the inside out. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The weapon in Werner's hands had arrived in Germany through the chaos of combat. In late 1942, during Operation Torch in North Africa, and simultaneously on the Eastern Front through Lend-Lease supplies to Soviet forces, German troops captured early production American M1 bazookas. On the night before the North African landings, General Dwight D. Eisenhower was shocked to learn that none of his troops had received any instruction in using the bazooka. The weapon was so new, so rushed into service, that even the soldiers carrying it barely understood how it worked. The Germans, always methodical, always thorough, shipped the captured weapons back to the fatherland for analysis. By early 1943, prototypes of their own version were already in development. But first, they needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with. How much damage could this American rocket actually inflict? Could it really threaten German armor? Or was it, as many suspected, simply propaganda, psychological warfare designed to make green American troops feel safer facing panzers? Werner sets the bazooka down and walks to the target, a section of steel plate mounted on a frame, 40 millimeters thick, the same thickness as the side armor on a Panther tank. Next to it stands a captured Sherman hull section for comparison. The test protocol is straightforward. Fire the American rocket at combat ranges. Measure penetration. Document failure points. Prove superiority. The first rocket loads with a metallic click. The fin-stabilized projectile slides into the rear of the tube, its copper wire trailing from the base. Werner's assistant makes the electrical connection. The weapon is ready. At 50 meters, Werner squeezes the trigger. The sound is not what he expected. No thunderous artillery crack, no refined precision. Just a rough hiss, a streak of flame, and a plume of grey smoke that hangs in the winter air. The rocket flies almost lazily across the range, its fins stabilizing the flight. Then, impact. The shaped charge detonates with a sharp crack. When the smoke clears, Werner approaches the target plate. His confident smile fades. The steel has a hole punched clean through it. Not a dent, not a crack, a complete penetration. Molten metal has sprayed through the backside of the plate exactly as a shaped charge is designed to do. He measures the hole. 60 millimeters. The warhead has defeated 40 millimeters of armor at 50 meters without difficulty. Werner's mind begins calculating. The side armor on a Panther is 40 to 50 millimeters. The ammunition storage bins are directly behind that armor, and those bins hold 52 rounds. His assistant speaks quietly. Should we test it against the Sherman plate? Werner nods, distracted. The second shot is fired. The American tank's side armor, roughly equivalent in thickness, suffers the same fate. Clean penetration. No ricochet, no deflection. The shaped charge doesn't care about angles at these ranges. it simply burns through. For the first time, Werner feels something unfamiliar. Not fear exactly, not yet, but a stirring of doubt. The weapon is crude, yes. Ugly, improvised. And if American infantry are carrying thousands of these tubes across North Africa, Italy, and soon France, then German tankers are in more danger than anyone has admitted. The tests continue through the afternoon, different angles, different ranges. Each time, the result is the same. The tests conducted by the German army showed the American bazooka and its German-inspired successor, the Panzerschreck, performed extremely well against armor at various angles. The shaped charge warhead, that revolutionary hollow cone of explosive with a copper liner, converts its detonation into a superheated jet of metal that can punch through steel like a blowtorch through butter. By evening, Werner has filled 3 pages with measurements and notes. The weapon is effective. That much is undeniable. But the full implications haven't hit him yet. He's thinking about countermeasures, about additional armor plates, about tactical doctrine. He's not yet thinking about what happens inside a Panther when this jet of molten copper finds those ammunition bins. That revelation will come later, and when it does, it will change everything. The German response to the American bazooka was characteristically efficient. The Panzerschreck development was initially based on the American bazooka captured during the Tunisian campaign in November 1942. But the Germans didn't simply copy the design. They improved it, scaled it up, made it deadlier. The German version increased the warhead diameter from 60 mm to 88 mm, giving it significantly greater armor penetration. They replaced the battery-powered firing mechanism with a magneto system, more reliable in the freezing conditions of the Eastern Front. They added a blast shield to protect the operator from the rocket's exhaust, which, unlike the American version, continued burning for 2 meters after leaving the tube. By late 1943, the Panzerschreck was in production. German soldiers called it by another name too, Offenrohr, the stovepipe, the same mocking nickname Americans had given their bazooka. But there was nothing mocking about its effect. In one engagement, Finnish forces, equipped with Panzerschrecks, destroyed 25 Soviet tanks. The weapon was proving its worth on every front. But here's the terrible irony that German tank crews were beginning to understand. The shaped charge technology that made the Panzerschreck so effective was equally devastating when used against them. The physics didn't discriminate. A jet of superheated metal punching through armor and igniting ammunition worked the same whether it came from an American M9 bazooka or a German Panzerschreck. And the Panther, for all its engineering excellence, for all its sloped frontal armor and powerful gun, had a catastrophic weakness hidden in plain sight. The stowage of 52 rounds of ammunition in the side sponsons made this area the most vulnerable point on the Panther, since penetration here usually led to catastrophic ammunition fires. Imagine you're a Panther tank commander in early 1944. Your machine is the pride of the Wehrmacht, designed to counter the Soviet T-34 and restore German superiority on the battlefield. Your frontal armor, 80 mm thick and sloped at 55 degrees, provides effective protection equivalent to 139 mm of vertical steel. Your gun, the formidable 75 mm Quay 42, can penetrate enemy tanks at ranges they can't even dream of shooting back. You've been trained to present your front to the enemy. Keep that glacis plate pointed at the threat. Let their shells bounce off your slopes. Fight at range where your gun's accuracy and power give you every advantage. The tactical manual is clear. The Panther dominates in open country, in long-range engagements where inferior Allied tanks can't get close. But what the manual doesn't adequately stress is what happens when the enemy does get close. When a bazooka team crawls through a hedgerow in Normandy, when infantry with Panzerschrecks hide in the rubble of an Italian town, when Soviet soldiers wait in a destroyed building on the Eastern Front with rocket launchers aimed at your flank, the side armor of the Panther is only 40 to 50 millimeters thick. Behind that thin steel plate, in those triangular sponson spaces above the tracks, your ammunition is stored. 18 rounds on each side of the Ausf, D and A models. 24 on each side of the later Ausf. G. 52 explosive shells total, each one packed with propellant, each one a potential bomb if the wrong thing touches it. A shaped charge doesn't need to score a clean penetration to kill you. It doesn't need to physically enter your tank and knock out crew members one by one. All it needs to do is pierce that 40mm side plate and spray molten metal into the sponson storage area. Just one round cooking off is enough. The first explosion triggers the second triggers the third, and suddenly you're sitting in a steel coffin filled with sympathetic detonations as your own ammunition turns your tank into a blast furnace. The Americans discovered this vulnerability through combat experience. British tank crews learned it the hard way in Italy. Soviet tankers firing captured Panzerfausts in street fighting saw Panthers explode like firecrackers when hit in the side. The intelligence reports piled up, all saying the same thing. Penetration of the side sponsons usually led to catastrophic ammunition fires. Back at the Munich test range, Werner and his team are beginning to understand the implications. They've run the numbers. They've calculated the penetration values. They've measured the angle of attack that allows a shaped charge to defeat the sponson armor. And the conclusion is unavoidable. Any bazooka team that can get within 100 meters of a Panther's flank has a better than even chance of destroying it with a single shot. This is not how tank warfare is supposed to work. Tanks are supposed to be invulnerable to infantry. That's the entire point. A Panther costs thousands of Reichsmarks and months of skilled labor to build. A bazooka round costs a few dollars and can be carried by any soldier willing to get close enough to fire it. The economics alone are terrifying. But it gets worse. The German engineers realize that this vulnerability isn't unique to American bazookas. The Germans' own Panzerschreck, firing its 88mm shaped charge, has even greater penetration capability. Which means that in the Eastern Front urban fighting, where Soviet troops are increasingly using captured Panzerschrecks and where house-to-house combat makes long-range engagements impossible, German Panthers are being killed by German weapons reverse-engineered from American designs. The bitter irony is inescapable. The Germans studied the American bazooka, recognized its potential, and built a superior version. And now that superior version is being used to exploit the fundamental design flaw in their best tank. Werner writes his report with a heavy heart. The language is clinical, professional, penetration values at various ranges, recommendations for tactical deployment, suggestions for additional armor plating. But between the lines, if you know how to read them, is a darker message. The age of tank invincibility is over. The shaped charge has changed everything. And the Panther, despite its excellence in so many ways, is fatally vulnerable to the very weapon Germany helped perfect. The question now is what to do about it. Additional armor adds weight, reduces mobility, strains the already overtaxed transmission and final drives that plague Panther reliability. Relocating ammunition requires redesigning the interior layout, impossible for tanks already in production. Tactical changes, keeping infantry screens close to prevent bazooka teams from getting near, are difficult to implement when German infantry is spread thin across multiple fronts. The truth is, there's no easy fix. The Panther's designers made a choice when they allocated interior space. They chose sloped frontal armor for protection against long-range anti-tank guns. They chose a powerful engine and wide tracks for mobility. They chose a devastating 75mm gun for firepower, and to fit all of that into a medium tank chassis, they stored ammunition in the side sponsons. It was a reasonable engineering compromise in 1942 when the Panther was designed. But by 1944, with bazookas proliferating across every theatre, with urban combat becoming more common, with Allied infantry learning to hunt tanks in close terrain, that compromise has become a death sentence. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The spring of 1944 brings the reality of this vulnerability into sharp focus. On the Western Front, Panther tanks face the Allied invasion of Normandy, where the bocage terrain and hedgerows make long-range combat impossible. The Norman countryside is a maze of sunken roads and thick vegetation, perfect ambush territory for bazooka teams. Oberleutnant Friedrich Sander commands a Panther OSF, A in Panzer Division. His crew has trained for months on open plains, practicing long-range gunnery, perfecting the tactics that make the Panther so deadly in the sweeping landscapes of Russia. But Normandy is nothing like Russia. Normandy is claustrophobic, tight, deadly. June 7th, the day after the invasion. Sander's platoon moves through a narrow lane between hedgerows, advancing to counterattack the beachhead. Visibility is maybe 50 meters. The vegetation is so thick you can't see threats until you're on top of them. Radio chatter reports American infantry everywhere, dug in, waiting. The first Panther in the column stops. Mines, suspected. The platoon bunches up behind, unable to turn around in the narrow lane. This is exactly the scenario tankers dread. Confined terrain, no maneuver room, invisible enemies all around. Sander feels his heart rate climbing. His gunner scans through the optics, searching for targets. His loader has a round in the chamber. But what good is a 75mm gun against an enemy you can't see? The sound when it comes is almost gentle, a quiet pop, like a champagne cork, then the hiss of a rocket motor. Sander doesn't see it, but he hears it impact the lead tank. For one heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the Panther erupts, not a clean explosion, a rolling series of detonations as ammunition cooks off inside the hull. Flames jet from every opening, the hatches, the engine deck, the turret ring. Black smoke boils into the sky. The crew, if they're lucky, has maybe 3 seconds to bail out. Some make it, others don't. Sander watches in horror as the lead tank transforms from a functional machine into a burning wreck in the space of 10 seconds. The hedgerow rustles. The American bazooka team is already relocating, repositioning for another shot. Sander's radio crackles. Second Panther is reversing, trying to back out of the kill zone. But reversing a Panther is agonizingly slow, the gear ratio designed for forward momentum, not retreat. Another pop, another hiss. The second tank's side sponson erupts in a shower of sparks and flame, catastrophic kill. The crew scrambles out, uniforms on fire, rolling in the dirt. Sander makes a decision. Forward, full throttle, crash through the hedgerow, even if it means damage, even if it means breaking track. Anything to get out of this death trap. His driver floors the accelerator. The Maybach engine roars. 45 tons of steel and armor smash through vegetation designed to stop farm equipment, not tanks. They break into the next field, and Sander can finally see the threat. 3 American soldiers, 1 carrying the bazooka, 2 providing cover. Too close for the main gun to depress properly. Sander's Hull machine gunner opens fire, the MG-34 chattering. The Americans scatter into cover. No confirmed kills, but they're suppressed, not shooting. Later, after hours of combat, after pulling back to regroup, Sander's platoon counts losses. 5 Panthers deployed that morning. 2 destroyed, 1 immobilized with track damage, 2 functional. 50% casualty rate in a single engagement, not against enemy tanks, not against anti-tank guns, but against infantry with bazookas. The after-action report reads like a nightmare. Enemy used terrain to negate our advantages. Shaped charge weapons penetrated side armor at close range. Ammunition fires caused catastrophic kills. Crew survival, poor. Recommendations: maintain infantry screen, avoid confined terrain, increase vigilance for dismounted threats. But everyone knows those recommendations are nearly impossible to implement. Infantry is stretched thin, the terrain is what it is, and American bazooka teams are learning, getting better, getting bolder. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Soviet forces are encountering similar success. The Red Army has studied the Panthers' vulnerabilities carefully. Soviet testing showed that while the Panther's thick frontal armor was immune to most Soviet tank guns in 1943, the side armor was vulnerable even to the aging 45mm gun. And for shaped charge weapons like the Panzerfaust and captured Panzerschrecks, The side sponsons are exactly as vulnerable as German testing predicted. Soviet infantry develop specialized anti-tank hunter teams. Their tactic is simple. Let the Panther pass, then hit it from the side or rear. In urban combat, they position teams on upper floors of buildings, firing down onto the thin top armor of the hull. In forests, they hide in undergrowth, waiting for the perfect flank shot. The shaped charge, unlike conventional armor-piercing shells, doesn't care about angle of impact as much. It burns through regardless. A report from 4th Panzer Army in July 1944 notes with alarm. Infantry anti-tank weapons account for 67% of Panther losses in urban operations. Ammunition fires are the primary cause of complete vehicle loss. 67%, not from enemy tanks, not from artillery. From soldiers with rocket launchers costing a fraction of a Panther's price. The Germans try countermeasures. In April 1943, they begin fitting Schürzen protective skirt armor to Panthers, thin 5mm steel plates designed to detonate shaped charges before they reach the main armor. It's a reasonable idea in theory. The skirts hang several inches away from the hull, creating a standoff gap that should reduce the effectiveness of shaped charge jets. But testing quickly shows the limitation. The skirts are useless against armor-piercing ammunition, and shaped charges still achieve kills when hitting areas not covered by the skirts. The sponson ammunition storage extends the full height of the hull. The skirts can't protect all of it, and in combat, the thin steel plates are easily damaged or torn off by vegetation, gunfire, or simply the rigors of cross-country movement. Some crews rig additional protection. Spare track links welded to the sponsons, sandbags packed against the sides, logs strapped to the hull. But in practice, about 1 meter of air gap is required to substantially reduce the penetrating capability of shaped charges, making makeshift solutions ineffective. The sandbags and spare tracks might stop shell fragments, might provide psychological comfort, but against a direct rocket hit, they're paper thin. The truth that German tank crews are learning, the truth that makes veterans wake up sweating at night, is that the Panther's protection is asymmetrical. From the front, at range, it's nearly invincible. Heavy weapons like the Soviet 122mm gun or American 90mm gun are needed to reliably penetrate the upper glacis plate at normal combat ranges. But from the side, at close range, a soldier with a rocket launcher has more killing power than most enemy tanks. This psychological shift is devastating. Tank commanders who once felt secure inside their armor now understand they're riding in machines with a fatal weakness. Every hedgerow in France might hide a bazooka team. Every ruined building in Italy could shelter a Panzerschreck operator. Every street corner in the collapsing cities of the Reich is a potential ambush point. The tactical doctrine that made the Panther so effective in open country, Russia's steppes, North Africa's deserts, now becomes a liability. Keep the enemy at range, fight from prepared positions, use your gun's superior accuracy and penetration. All good advice, until the fighting moves into terrain where range doesn't exist and the enemy can get close enough to use shaped charges. Sander, the tank commander from Normandy, survives long enough to see his division transferred to the Ardennes for Hitler's winter offensive in December. The Battle of the Bulge sees 400 Panthers assigned to the Western Front, and once again demonstrates the tank's prowess in open country and its vulnerability in close quarters, fighting through the small towns of the Ardennes. In the village fighting, Sander sees Panthers brewing up, just like in Normandy. American infantry have learned to be patient, to let the tanks push ahead without infantry support, then emerge from basements and hit them from behind. The bazooka, crude as it is, has become the great equalizer. A 45-ton tank that requires months to build, skilled crews to operate, and precious fuel to move can be destroyed in seconds by a 19-year-old private from Iowa with a week's training on a shoulder-fired rocket. By January 15, 1945, only 97 operational Panthers remained from the units involved in the operation, out of 282 still in their possession. Total write-offs were listed as 198. The losses are staggering. Some are from enemy tanks, some from artillery, some from mechanical breakdown, but a significant portion, everyone knows, are from those side sponson hits that ignite ammunition and turn a Panther into a fireball. The final cruel irony comes in the war's last months. German infantry, now equipped with huge numbers of Panzerfausts, the disposable single-shot shaped charge weapons, find themselves defending cities street by street. They're using the same tactics against Soviet tanks that Soviet infantry used against them. Hide, wait for the flank shot, fire the shaped charge, watch the enemy tank burn. And when retreating German forces abandon Panthers due to fuel shortages or mechanical failure, they see Soviet troops turning the tables completely. Captured German vehicles, repaired and pressed into service, now face the very weapons that exposed their weakness. Russian tankers riding in German Panthers learn the same hard lesson. Keep your front. To the enemy, avoid close terrain, fear the shaped charge above all else. The weapon that Werner tested on that cold January morning in 1944 had revealed more than just a penetration value. It had exposed the fundamental transformation of armoured warfare. The shaped charge, that elegant application of physics discovered decades earlier, had shifted the balance of power from the tank to the infantryman. And nowhere was this shift more evident than in the final desperate battles for Germany itself. By March 1945, the war has entered its terminal phase. The Reich is collapsing from east and west simultaneously. Soviet armies are grinding through Poland toward Berlin. American and British forces have crossed the Rhine. German industry, pounded by years of strategic bombing, struggles to produce replacement vehicles. Fuel shortages mean that perfectly functional Panthers sit abandoned on roadsides, out of petrol, their crews walking home. But the shaped charge vulnerability that seemed like a tactical problem in 1944 has become an existential crisis in 1945. Because now German tankers aren't just facing enemy bazookas and Panzerschrecks. They're facing their own Panzerfausts in the hands of soldiers who've learned exactly where to aim. Hauptmann Werner, the engineer who tested that first captured bazooka, finds himself pressed into service as a tank commander. By late war, Germany is so desperate for experienced personnel that rear echelon specialists are being thrown into combat roles. Werner's technical knowledge, his understanding of armour penetration and vulnerability, makes him simultaneously more effective and more terrified than most commanders. He knows too much. He knows that the 40mm side armour on his Panther Ausf Guy can be defeated by virtually any shaped charge weapon at combat range. He knows that the 52 rounds stored in his side sponsons are waiting to detonate the moment hot metal touches them. He knows that the armour quality on late-war German tanks suffered from production shortcuts, with some plates showing catastrophic cracking when hit, making even non-penetrating strikes potentially fatal. April 1st, 1945. Werner's company is defending a town in western Germany against American advance. His orders are to hold as long as possible, then retreat to the next defensive line. The Americans have overwhelming numerical superiority, air supremacy, and unlimited supplies. The German defenders have desperation, experience, and the knowledge that every hour of delay might allow civilians to evacuate eastward, ironically toward the Soviet advance, because at least the Americans won't burn entire cities in revenge. Werner positions his Panther in a hull-down position behind rubble, only the turret exposed. Classic defensive tactics. Force the Americans to come through the kill zone, use the main gun's superior range and accuracy, relocate before they can bring artillery to bear. It's textbook. It's what he was trained to do. But the Americans have learned too. They don't charge blindly into the kill zone. Instead, they probe with infantry, feeling for the strong points. When they locate Werner's position, they don't send tanks. They send bazooka teams, moving through the rubble from multiple directions, using the urban terrain exactly as German doctrine warned would happen. Werner's commander's cupola gives him good visibility, but visibility means nothing when the threat is a man with a rocket launcher hiding in a basement 60 meters away. His hull machine gunner reports movement. Sector 3, ground level. Werner traverses the turret. Too slow. The Panther's excellent gun and thick frontal armour are useless against an enemy that refuses to present a target. the American bazooka team fires from the flank. Werner feels more than hears the impact, a dull thud against the right sponson. For one terrible moment, he waits for the secondary explosion. Waits for his own ammunition to cook off and kill him. But nothing happens. The shaped charge penetrated the armor. He can hear his loader screaming that there's fire in the sponson. But somehow, miraculously, the ammunition hasn't ignited yet. Werner orders immediate evacuation. His crew bails out through the hatches, scrambling away from the tank. They make it 30 meters before the Panther explodes. Not a single massive detonation, but a rolling series of blasts as rounds cook off one after another. The turret lifts off the hull, suspended for a moment in the air before crashing back down at an angle. Flames pour from every opening. Another Panther lost to a weapon that costs less than a single tank's road wheels. Werner and his crew survive, only to be ordered to another tank, another position, another delaying action in a war everyone knows is already lost. By this point, the German tank forces are shadows of their former strength. Throughout the war, approximately 6,000 Panthers were produced, but by spring 1945, only a few hundred remain operational across all fronts. Fuel shortages, mechanical breakdowns, and combat losses have gutted the Panzer divisions, and those that remain in action face an enemy that has perfected the art of hunting them. American infantry tactics by war's end are brutally efficient. Suppress the tank with small arms fire to keep the crew buttoned up, maneuver bazooka teams to the flanks under covering fire, fire multiple rockets simultaneously from different angles to ensure at least one hits the sponson. The shaped charge has turned tank hunting from a desperate gamble into a calculated procedure. Soviet tactics are even more aggressive. Red Army combined arms doctrine integrates anti-tank teams directly into rifle companies. Every infantry advance includes dedicated Panzerfaust hunters, often armed with captured German weapons. They've studied the Panther's vulnerabilities exhaustively. They know about the ammunition storage. They know about the shot trap on the gun mantlet. They know that penetrations through the thin forward hull roof can plunge down into the front compartment where ammunition is stored directly underneath the gun mantlet. The psychology of German tank crews in these final weeks is worth understanding. They're not cowards. They're professional soldiers, many with years of experience, fighting for their homeland against overwhelming odds. But they also know the mathematics of survival. Every engagement where infantry can get close is potentially fatal. Every street corner, every hedgerow, every pile of rubble is an ambush point where a shaped charge might find that vulnerable side armor. Some commanders become paranoid, refusing to move without massive infantry screens. Others become fatalistic, accepting that death is inevitable and fighting with desperate courage. Still others try to preserve their machines, pulling back too quickly, hoarding ammunition, avoiding decisive action because every destroyed Panther is irreplaceable. The technical report that Werner wrote back in January 1944, the one documenting bazooka penetration values and recommending countermeasures, sits in a filing cabinet somewhere in a burning ministry building. The recommendations were never fully implemented. Additional armor would have required redesigning the entire hull. Relocating ammunition would have meant halting production to retool factories. Tactical changes requiring close infantry support were impossible when infantry strength collapsed across all fronts. The Panther, despite its excellence in so many areas, was trapped by its own design. Those 52 rounds in the side sponsons were there because the designers needed somewhere to store ammunition. The alternative was reducing combat load, making the tank less effective in sustained engagements. It was a reasonable engineering choice in 1942. By 1945, it had become the Panther's defining weakness. Consider the broader implications. The shaped charge weapon, pioneered by American and British scientists, captured and improved by Germans, proliferated across every army by war's end, represented a fundamental shift in military technology. For the first time, infantry possessed a truly effective anti-tank capability that didn't require heavy, crew-served weapons. A single soldier could carry enough firepower to destroy any tank in existence. This democratization of anti-armor capability changed not just World War II, but all subsequent conflicts. The bazooka's descendants, the RPG, the LAW, the AT-4, modern Javelin missiles, all trace their lineage back to that crude steel tube tested by Werner in Bavaria. The principle remains the same: shaped, charge, warhead, portable launcher, infantry carried. The technology has become more sophisticated, but the fundamental concept, that asymmetric warfare where cheap weapons can destroy expensive machines, was proven on the battlefields of 1944 and 45. For the Panther specifically, the vulnerability represented wasted potential. The tank had excellent firepower, protection, and mobility. Its 75mm gun could defeat any Allied tank at ranges where return fire was impossible. Its frontal armor made it nearly immune to most enemy weapons when properly positioned. Its mobility, despite reliability issues, allowed for rapid repositioning and exploitation of breakthrough. But none of that mattered when an American private with 3 weeks of training could sneak through a hedgerow and fire a rocket into the sponson. All the engineering excellence, all the manufacturing precision, all the tactical doctrine became irrelevant the moment that shaped charge jet burned through 40mm of side armor and found ammunition. The final days of the war see Panthers abandoned in increasing numbers. Some crews sabotage their vehicles rather than let them fall into enemy hands. Others simply walk away when the fuel runs out. A few fight to the bitter end, going down in flames, defending positions that no longer matter in a war that's already decided. Werner survives the war. He's captured by American forces in late April, processed through a POW camp, eventually released after denazification screening. In the years after, he works in civilian industry, applies his engineering knowledge to peaceful purposes, tries to forget the burning tanks and screaming crews. But sometimes, late at night, he thinks about that morning in January 1944, the captured bazooka on the test range, the clean hole punched through 40mm of steel, the moment when he realized what it meant. If he could go back, knowing what he knows now, would he write a different report? Would stronger warnings have changed anything? Could the vulnerability have been fixed in time? Probably not. The shaped charge's advantages were too fundamental. The Panther's design was too far along to alter significantly. And by 1944, Germany was losing the war through factors far beyond any single weapon system. Industrial capacity, manpower, resources, strategic bombing, multiple front warfare, all contributed more to the Reich's defeat than the Panther's sponson vulnerability. But still, the weapon that Werner tested, that crude American stovepipe, had revealed something profound. It showed that technological sophistication could be defeated by elegant simplicity, that expensive machines could be destroyed by cheap weapons, that the age of tank invincibility, if it ever truly existed, was over. The shaped charge didn't win the war. Allied numerical superiority, Soviet determination, American industrial might, British intelligence work, resistance movements across occupied Europe, all contributed more to victory than any single weapon. But the shaped charge changed how the war was fought. It gave infantry a confidence they'd lacked before. It forced tank designers to reconsider armor schemes. It demonstrated that the next war, whatever form it took, would be different from the last. In the decades after World War II, tank design evolved to address the shaped charge threat. Spaced armor, explosive reactive armor, composite materials, active protection systems, all emerged as responses to the basic problem. How do you protect a tank from a weapon that doesn't rely on kinetic energy but on focused thermal energy to defeat armor? Modern main battle tanks are in many ways shaped by lessons learned from the Panther's vulnerability. Ammunition is stored in protected compartments, often with blowout panels that direct explosions away from the crew. Armor schemes assume shaped charge threats and design accordingly. Defensive systems detect incoming rockets and intercept them before impact. But the fundamental tension remains. A tank must store ammunition somewhere. It must balance protection, mobility, and firepower. And infantry anti-tank weapons continue to evolve, developing countermeasures to each new defensive system. The asymmetry that the bazooka introduced, where a soldier on foot can threaten a vehicle worth millions, has become a permanent feature of modern warfare. For the men who fought in Panthers during World War II, the memory of that vulnerability stayed with them long after the war ended. Veterans would gather at reunions, tell stories of battles and comrades, share the dark humor that only those who faced death together can appreciate. And inevitably, someone would mention the sponsons, the ammunition storage, the terrible moment when a shaped charge hit and you had 3 seconds to bail out before the tank became an oven. One veteran, interviewed decades later, put it simply, "We were told the Panther was invincible from the front, and it was, mostly. But wars aren't fought from the front only. And the moment you had to turn, to maneuver, to move through a village or a forest, that whole side of the tank was a target, 52 rounds waiting to explode. We knew it. The Americans knew it. The Russians knew it. Everyone knew it. And there was nothing we could do except fight anyway." That resignation, that acceptance of vulnerability, marked a shift in how soldiers related to their machines. Earlier in the war, tank crews had felt relatively secure inside their armor. By war's end, they understood that no armor was proof against everything, that every weapon had a weakness. That survival was as much about tactics, terrain, and luck as about the quality of your machine. The story of the Panther and the shaped charge is ultimately a story about technological evolution and its consequences. When German engineers tested that captured bazooka in January 1944, they didn't just measure penetration values. They witnessed the beginning of a new era in warfare, an era where the expensive and sophisticated could be defeated by the simple and cheap, where engineering excellence still mattered, but couldn't guarantee victory, where the battlefield was being democratized, giving individual soldiers capabilities that once required massive weapons systems. The irony is that Germany contributed to this evolution. The Panzerschreck, inspired by the captured American bazooka, was in many ways superior to its inspiration. German engineers took the American concept, improved it, made it more powerful, and then watched as those improvements were used against their own tanks. They had helped create the very weapon that exploited their most advanced machine's greatest weakness. This is the nature of arms races. Technologies proliferate. Adversaries copy and improve. What gives you an advantage today becomes your vulnerability tomorrow. The shaped charge that killed Panthers in 1944 would kill Soviet tanks in 1956 during the Hungarian uprising, as resistance fighters used Panzerfausts, hoarded from the war. It would destroy American tanks in Vietnam as the Viet Cong fired RPGs from jungle cover. It would account for tank losses in every subsequent conflict, from the Six-Day War to Desert Storm to modern counterinsurgency operations. The lineage traces directly back to that crude steel tube that Werner held on a Bavarian test range. The bazooka, mockingly nicknamed the stovepipe, became the ancestor of every infantry anti-tank weapon that followed. Its legacy isn't just the tanks it destroyed, but the fundamental shift it represented in the relationship between infantry and armor. For the Panther specifically, the vulnerability serves as a reminder that no weapon system is perfect. Every design involves compromises. The engineers who created the Panther made choices, allocating space and weight and protection according to their understanding of how tank warfare would evolve. They got many things right: the sloped frontal armor, the powerful gun, the reasonably good mobility for a vehicle of its weight. But they also made a choice about ammunition storage that seemed reasonable at the time and became fatal as shaped charge weapons proliferated. The 52 rounds stored inside sponsons, directly behind relatively thin armor, created a vulnerability that led to catastrophic ammunition fires when penetrated. This wasn't incompetence or oversight. It was simply the reality of designing a complex machine with limited space and competing priorities. If the designers had known in 1942 how common-shaped charge weapons would become by 1944, they might have prioritized ammunition protection differently. But design is always a prediction about future conditions, and predictions are always imperfect. The broader lesson, the one that extends beyond World War II and beyond tank warfare, is about the nature of technological competition. Sophisticated systems create their own vulnerabilities. Complexity offers opportunities for simpler solutions. Expensive machines can be defeated by cheap weapons if those weapons exploit fundamental physics in clever ways. The shaped charge was that kind of clever solution. Instead of trying to match the kinetic energy of a tank gun, which required a heavy weapon and crew to operate, it used thermal energy and focused explosion to burn through armor. Instead of competing with tanks on their terms, it changed the terms of competition entirely. This pattern repeats throughout military history and beyond. The crossbow defeated knights in armor. The machine gun defeated cavalry charges. Precision-guided munitions defeated massed armor formations. Improvised explosive devices threatened the most sophisticated military vehicles. Each time, expensive and complex systems encountered simpler solutions that exploited their vulnerabilities. For Werner, looking back from the vantage point of decades later, the lesson was humbling. All his technical knowledge, all his understanding of armor and penetration mechanics, hadn't been enough. The bazooka worked not because of sophisticated engineering, but because it applied basic physics elegantly. The shaped charge, discovered decades before the war, simply needed the right delivery system to become devastating. And the Panther, for all its excellence, couldn't overcome that basic vulnerability. 52 rounds in the sponsons, 40 millimeters of side armor, a shaped charge that burned through at combat range. The mathematics were simple and unforgiving. In the end, the story isn't really about a specific tank or a specific weapon. It's about the eternal competition between protection and attack, between armor and projectile, between complexity and simplicity. That competition has driven military technology for millennia and will continue as long as humans fight wars. The bazooka and the Panther just happen to represent one moment in that competition, one demonstration of how that competition plays out. The crude American stovepipe found the weak spot in the sophisticated German tank, and in doing so, it changed how the war was fought and how future wars would be planned. The veterans who survived, on both sides, carried that knowledge with them. The Americans who fired bazookas at Panthers learned that courage and proper tactics could defeat superior machines. The Germans who served in Panthers learned that no machine, however excellent, could guarantee survival. And everyone learned that warfare had changed in fundamental ways, that the shaped charge had rewritten the rules of armored combat. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.